In 1995, a quiet Michigan subdivision woke up to workers in protective suits, dismantling a backyard potting shed like it was a tiny nuclear site. The person who made it dangerous was not a rogue company, a foreign spy, or a villain from a bunker-shaped movie. He was a teenager with a Boy Scout sash, an after-school job budget, and a curiosity that repeatedly outran the adults trying to stop him. His name was David Hahn, and the nickname that later followed him was almost too perfect: the Radioactive Boy Scout. Headlines often say he built a nuclear reactor in his parents' backyard garage. Hahn later said he attempted a breeder reactor and assembled crude neutron-source devices. Officials verified dangerous contamination, but not a working fission machine. That distinction matters because his project did not power a light bulb. It contaminated a shed badly enough for a federal cleanup. David grew up near Detroit as the kind of kid who treated chemistry books less like homework and more like treasure maps. He made experiments in his bedroom, then the basement, then wherever family patience had not yet been completely dissolved. There were stains, fumes, small explosions, and the timeless parental realization that science project can be a very flexible phrase. The Boy Scouts were supposed to give his obsession structure. In 1991, he earned the Atomic Energy Merit Badge. He completed the required model and learned the nuclear science basics the badge was meant to teach. But earning the badge did not end his interest. It gave the obsession somewhere new to go. He read everything he could find, wrote to agencies and experts, and sometimes presented himself as more official than he really was. He collected tiny radioactive sources from consumer products and old objects, including americium-bearing smoke detectors, thorium-bearing lantern mantles, clock dials, and mineral samples. Those items are designed to stay sealed, regulated, and boring, which is exactly why this story should never be mistaken for a tutorial. In ordinary use, they were not neighborhood villains. Broken apart, concentrated, and combined in a shed, they became a different problem. David's goal was a breeder reactor, a machine that would make more usable nuclear fuel than it consumed. What he had was ambition, fragments of real science, and a dangerous gap between knowing words and controlling consequences. In his mother's potting shed in Gulf Manor, the project became both secret and physical: jars, tools, metal, notes, and a Geiger counter. The counter mattered because radiation does not smell, glow, hiss, or politely announce that someone has made a terrible spreadsheet. According to later reporting, readings climbed high enough that David began to understand the shed was not just messy, it was unsafe. The tragedy of that moment is that fear finally reached him after earlier interventions had failed to stop the project. He started dismantling the setup and moved some material into a toolbox in his car, which is not a sentence that improves as it continues. On August 31, 1994, police stopped him while investigating a report about possible tire theft and found the suspicious materials. When David warned them the contents were radioactive, the situation left ordinary police work and entered the land of bomb squads, health officials, and federal calls. The authorities eventually traced the problem back to the shed. On June 26, 1995, EPA crews arrived with protective gear, saws, drums, and the grim patience of people cleaning up someone else's dangerous experiment. Harper's later described neighbors watching workers cut apart the shed and pack the pieces into steel drums marked with radiation warnings. The cleanup reportedly lasted 3 days, cost about $60,000, and sent dozens of barrels of low-level radioactive waste to Utah. For the neighborhood, the official reassurance was that there was no broad disaster. For the family, the backyard had become evidence. Later health physics summaries say no public health effects are known, though David himself may have received exposures professionals wanted to evaluate. He refused that kind of medical survey, which left a question mark where a measurement should have been. This is where the myth usually wants to crown him as a misunderstood genius. But the more human story is harder. David was clever, isolated, reckless, and still a kid whose projects slip through repeated gaps in supervision. Curiosity can be beautiful, but curiosity without mentorship can turn a workbench into a hazard map. Science is not just daring to ask what if, it is also learning when the answer requires a laboratory, a license, and someone who can tell you no. David Hahn later served in the military and died in 2016 at age 39, leaving behind a story people still argue about as legend, warning, and heartbreak. The Radioactive Boy Scout did not prove that backyard nuclear science is possible. He proved that curiosity without boundaries can make a whole neighborhood hold its breath, which is about as oddly human as danger gets.